In this video, we're going to be covering the key ways you can prepare for an interview. Those are specifically researching the company, researching the job, preparing for common interview questions when you don't know what they're going to be, and preparing for presentations. If you've got any further questions, don't hesitate to get in touch. I'm happy to answer any of them directly or deal with anything specific to your job interview. So when you're preparing for your interview, you want to research the company, the sector, how the company is funded, how they present themselves, what their culture is like. You want to research your interviewers and keep up to date with company news as the recruitment process continues. So in terms of understanding the company, the key things that you want to do are make sure you understand their product or service. You can always check on YouTube to see if there's an explainer video, if there's any demonstrations or company webinars. White papers are a great source of information. Make sure you know what their business model is and how they make money. So if there isn't a transparent pricing due to maybe not being a product-based business, then you can look at other sites which might give you an indication as to the level they pitch themselves at, whether or not it's an expensive service or a lower tier service. Another place you can get valuable insights into the company that's often overlooked is SlideShare. There may be executives who've presented at conferences, and by having a look at this, you can really understand the direction of the business and be on the same wavelength as the people that you are meeting with. To understand the market and sector, you will always find publications from major consultancies, business intelligence platforms, niche news sites that are really specific to that sector. And again, webinars by consultants operating in that area are a great source of information. You can look at how the company presents itself on LinkedIn and social media channels, what kind of things they're posting about, what kind of issues they're supporting. But you can also, if you have access to insights, get information about the rate of growth. You can review average tenure of people within that business. When you're doing that, my recommendation would be to focus on the sector or segment of the business that you are going into. A company could have really high turnover, if it's got a call center operation, and that could skew the fact that there's a really stable product and marketing team, for example. So consider what is relevant to this role and, be able to see the important changes that are happening when you go in and analyze things. Another thing to do is look at the profiles of people who currently do or have previously done this role in the past. What is it they had in common? What are they doing now? How long do they stay in that role? Do they progress internally? And when you look at them, objectively think about how you compare and what objections you may encounter during the interview process and how you proactively could answer any questions around those areas. When it comes to the company's culture, Glassdoor is going to give you loads of information, but for early stage companies, that might not always be the case. So if you are interviewing with someone who is not a first-time founder, then you can look at the companies that they previously have worked at and the overlap of reviews during their tenure there. There are also lots of anonymous sites beyond Glassdoor that you could consider if you had any red flags and wanted to go further. Researching how the company is funded is something very few candidates do. You can check Crunchbase, press releases, other data sources, look at the websites of investors, see are they people who are going to be able to follow through and add value to that business. Now, when it comes to researching the interviewers, obviously you're going to look at their LinkedIn profiles, especially if you've been supplied them in advance. The obvious things are, do you have any mutual connections or interests? And it's worth making notes here because not everybody is a natural at building rapport, and it might give you an icebreaker if you're stuck in a Zoom call for a minute or two with somebody before everyone else joins. Many job seekers check out news that companies put out there. But it's a good idea to set up a Google alert if you're going through a recruitment process so that once you've done your research, you're informed if something changes during the time that you're interviewing with the company. Now, let's look at how you can research a job. So, before you start researching the job a little bit more, reread the job description or candidate briefing pack that you've been supplied with. Now, if you're working with me, there's a good chance that I will be able to advise you on the purpose of each interview and the scorecard, as we would help design interview processes for clients. There's only so much we can give away, but you want to really understand what you are doing at each stage of the interview process so you can tailor your efforts to it. If you're watching this and you are not working with ourselves, the key question to ask your recruiter is, do they know if there's a scorecard? And if so, what's on it? So when you're interviewing, you want to feel like you're prepared for the questions. One thing which should be really obvious, but sometimes people don't think about how they're going to communicate, is why you are there. Make sure that whoever is interviewing you knows why you want to do that job with that company in that industry, and try and make it as personal and meaningful as possible. This is your chance as well to cover any big changes that you're making in your career, but really think about what it is about that job that is special to you. Is it because they provide a meaningful service, like they perhaps enhance access to financial products for people who don't have them traditionally? Or it could be that you just really resonate with their values, or you want to work with people of their caliber. You want to make sure that you have got a story about what that means to you. And that ties in with thinking about your aspirations. You want to be able to articulate them. I'm not going to spend time on that just now, but what sets candidates apart is what you have done towards making those aspirations a reality. It's much more memorable if a candidate says, I really want to be in this job in a few years, and in order to do that, I have learned this, or I'm studying for this qualification, or I've sought out mentors, or I've created a 5-year plan, and the things I've done towards it are A, B, and C. Now, obviously, you want to be clear on what value you bring to the company. So have specific examples of what you've done for other businesses that you can bring to that business that are in line with the company's objectives. And if you don't know what the company's objectives are and what the purpose of that role is, then definitely speak to your recruiter or review your candidate briefing pack, because it should be pretty clear in there how this is going to bring them closer to success. By articulating these in really specific, quantifiable terms, you're going to build a lot more trust with people that you are capable of delivering in terms of successful outcomes for the role. People will be a lot more confident in making a positive decision about your interview. If you are struggling to come up with anything that makes you different or is a core achievement, these things tend to fall into 3 kind of categories. The first one being made, all the things that you have made from scratch, and that can be a process, not just a product. Ways you have saved companies money, so saved is definitely another thing. And achieved, that's obviously like awards, special recognition, unusual accomplishments. Have them written down and make sure you know what they are before you go in. When you really don't know what you're going to be asked, it's important that you are clear about what makes you special. So have a think about what your 3 core strengths are and have examples of them in action. Even if you're not asked a question specifically to prove that strength or attribute, just having those stories ready with the facts and figures is going to make it much easier to pepper them into questions that you're asked that are maybe not quite identical, and make sure that you can get that over. Another thing which can really help you with what makes you special, what makes you bring value, what makes you somebody who is going to, achieve in the future, not just now for your current employer, is being able to evidence feedback that you've had about your strengths and weaknesses in previous performance reviews. So if you have any of them, it's worth having a read over them and thinking about what you have done to develop the areas that were brought up, that you could improve on and do better. Have you read any books? Have you sought coaching or mentoring? Have you taken yourself out your comfort zone, or have you now got evidence that you can, be really successful in that area that was highlighted for development? It's obvious, but think about what questions you're going to be asked. So it makes sense to think this through, but rather than focusing on the question here, nail down the specific scenarios. Don't just think about the STAR technique or SOAR technique that you may have been told: situation, task, action, result, or situation, objective, action, and result. Think about a couple of times where things did not go to plan or not as initially expected, and be really clear about the obstacles you overcame and all the most important lessons that you have learned. And you might be asking, look, why would I do that? There will be questions that you will be asked in some interviews which all feel absolutely icky and horrible because they're asking you about the times that things have gone wrong. So you should be prepared. Now, when companies are asking those questions, they're not always looking for you to have the super happy ending, because it could be a crisis management situation and there's only so much you can do. But what the company will be looking for or should be assessing you on is like your behavior in those different situations. What did you do to solve all those problems? When did you give up? How often did you keep trying? What decisions did you make? Who did you consult with? And, really looking for that humility and ability to keep learning throughout your career. And some companies also believe it gives a sense of motivation, perseverance, and a lot more attributes. So think of all the things that you can contribute that you have learned the hard way. And you might wonder why that would be the case. But as I said, interviews are changing. Lots of people are really smart to how competency-based questions work. So they're looking for a little bit extra, and they're maybe not always assessing you on the results. If you're interviewing, there's a good chance that you'll be asked to do a presentation of some form. It might be that it's like a traditional presentation, or it might be, even online whiteboarding. Every single presentation is unique, but there's a few things that run across them all. Plan them well. You can use tools like SlideShare to help get inspiration about how to lay things out or to structure things. That's something which can really accelerate your research if you're changing sector. It's often considered quite good practice, especially if you're looking at a marketing or executive role these days, to make sure that your presentation is as in line with the company's brand and style as possible. So think about what colors they would use. Are there any elements? If they're using fonts, try and mirror them. It just helps create that sense of people seeing this is what it'd be like if you worked there. Always practice. Do a run through. Share your presentation with your recruiter. I'm obviously happy to look at anything that you create. A second set of eyes generally does find some kind of typo or mistake, or provides you with some insight that you maybe just haven't seen because you've been working so hard on perfecting things. If you are doing a run through, if you can, get somebody who knows the sector, the company, or does that role, who is a trusted mentor or friend, to give you some feedback. The two areas that are most often overlooked with presentations that we see these days are around preparing for questions and the final slide. So when it comes to preparing for questions, many people just do the presentation and you've obviously digested loads of information as you've created it. So think that you are going to be able to just wing it in the moment, which many people do, and it's fine. However, it's worth thinking about any obvious questions that a panel might put to you, and be prepared to back up your data, cite your sources, and outline any assumptions that you have made. And by thinking about the questions that could come up at each stage of the way, you're not going to have your flow disrupted if somebody starts asking you questions throughout the presentation unexpectedly. If you have been lucky enough to have a friend or your recruiter watch you do the presentation or go through a run through with you, ask them what questions they would ask you. The last slide is often a missed opportunity for candidates. Many presentations are given over Zoom, or the slide is just left hanging on television in a conference room, and 9 times out of 10, it's a giant question mark or someone looking quizzical or it says, any questions? This is a missed opportunity to sell yourself. You may be able to use this slide as a way to wrap up the presentation with, I don't know, maybe 3 succinct themes, depending on what you have been asked to cover. Or you might want to just summarize it in a sentence. Many people are asked to do first 90-day presentations. You might want to say, in 90 days, the company will have a strategic plan, quick wins will have been identified and executed, and the client pipeline will have increased through X, Y, and Z. That kind of lasting message is just a little psychological nudge that can help you be more successful in your presentation. So I hope this has been informative and at the very least a useful refresher. If there's anything that is outstanding or you want to cover with me in relation to a role, feel free to get in touch using the contact details below. Always happy to help. And most importantly, good luck with your interview.